Hi, Christine. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Hi. I have a distracting animal running around me. My cat jumping all over things, just came in from outside, isn't sure what to make of this weather.
Ah, yes. Not a snow cat.
Well, surprisingly likes to go out. At this hour, my preference is no going out after like 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's too dark and cold, and
And that means you got to go out if you have to find it.
have to. Rarely do they do that anymore. But how big is your dog? Your dog looks like a 70-pound, 80-pound dog.
100 pounds. She's a big girl.
Wow.
She's actually a very small Saint Bernard. Our other saint was like 130 pounds, so she's quite a bit smaller, actually.
What's it like to feed a dog like that? Like a person, like feeding another person?
Pretty much. I mean, she's not so bad. It's like 5 or 6 cups, but you know.
5 or 6 cups a day?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As much as the cat would eat in like 3 weeks, probably.
Well, I use this dehydrated food, and then I add meat to it, and depending on what's on sale.
There's Megan Humphrey wishing us a happy inauguration day. Hi, Megan. Thank you.
Yeah, it was so fun to watch it. Kind of sad that it was not more ceremony, but it's still fun.
They made the best of a pretty tough situation.
Yeah. Well, in one way, it was because you could see people, so it was sort of easier without all the crowd. But
yes, that's true. Christine, what I think we'll do, get started in just less than a minute, because Councillor Hightower has a conflict. She's on another committee that is very time sensitive to get their work done, to assess the school resource officers for the Burlington schools, and the issue is reaching a point where she had to be there. So Councillor Carpenter and I are the only 2 committee members here. And what I'd like to do once we approve our agenda and get started is make all of the attendees into panelists, because we're going to mostly have a conversation and hear from them and get their perspective. So let's see if we have our agenda is to approve the agenda, approve the minutes from November 30 and December 11, public forum, and then get into the discussion about senior services and the recommendations that came from the 2019 ad hoc committee. I don't think we'll get to item 5, which is sort of the municipal property tax burden on low-income property owners. I think that's a much bigger issue that deserves a lot of attention, but it won't be the focus of our discussions tonight. Other business, and then setting a date, which will be hard without Councilor Hightower. So we'll pick a couple tentatives and hope see if it can work for her. But she's I would say one of the most extended council members in terms of
yes, yes.
So, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I would so move.
I'm in favor, so I think we're all set. We have an approved agenda. We have minutes that Christine provided for November 30, December 12, 2020 on both of those. I'm sorry, December 11 and November 30.
And I see we do have other panelists or other attendees, which we could also promote. Megan, I'm assuming Beth from Heineberg, and looks like we have a representative from the Living Well group. So we should promote all of them up to panelists.
Excellent. Okay, let's do that. And I think we have to formally take a vote. So all in favor of approving our minutes from November 30 and December 11, 2020? Aye. The ayes have it. All right. What we'll do is promote the attendees to panelists now, Christine, and invite people to speak in public forum if they wish, but we're going to ask each organization to speak about the services they offer and the needs that they see that go unmet, or I should say, yeah, unmet is probably the best way to put it. So I'd open it up for public forum before we ask you all to share your information with us. Is there anybody who wants to speak?
Well, and Brian, I'm totally open to having the public speak, but I understand in lieu of an official public forum, if we allow everybody from the public to speak, we can just move into a conversation. I think if anyone has anything to address us that is not related to the senior business portion of the agenda, maybe we could do that and then kind of move into the conversation on the senior business part of the agenda.
I like that plan. That sounds good. Is there anybody on this meeting who's not here to talk to us about seniors and senior issues and needs? Okay. So if we could,
We have a pretty niche group here.
I'm glad we reached out the way we did. It was I think worth it. And I will just give you a sense of what we're hoping to accomplish. Really, is this committee was tasked quite a while ago with taking the recommendations of the ad hoc committee that was formed in 2019 that reported back to council. The urgency of that committee was driven by the needs of Champlain Senior Center, and since that time, the city, well, about the same time, the city was taking over, if you will, sort of responsibilities for that senior center. And I think the urgency is no longer causing us to move rapidly on these issues, but more importantly, one of the other recommendations of that ad hoc committee on seniors was to convene some sort of a council or commission or something on seniors and keep those issues in the forefront and ensure that we're thinking about the needs of our older residents in a more focused, more proactive, more collaborative way. So that's the beginning of this. That's what we're starting now. And I'm really excited to have you all here. I know you all, and the screen shows your names, but I think for the record, if we could have you say your name and your affiliation. And Megan, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. My name's Megan Humphrey, and I'm the Executive Director of HANDS, and we get food to low-income seniors in Chittenden County. But there are also, my understanding, and Sarah, you might know this number better, but I think there are about 12,000 seniors in Burlington alone. So it's a big portion of the people who live in this city, and there are a lot of needs there, certainly exacerbated by COVID. So Cameron is actually on our board, and HANDS has partnered a lot with Heineberg in the last year to really quickly get more food immediately to seniors. And so we've developed some programs specifically with Heineberg and many other partners, but it started with the two of us to get some more programs going to get food to seniors. So that's our mission.
And tell us, I know, what does HANDS stand for? It's a true acronym.
Yes, it is an acronym. We usually use HANDS, but because we came up with HANDS first and then had to fill in the letters. So it's Helping and Nurturing Diverse Seniors. That's Gail Morrow and me. That's what we came up with. And then we have other programs during the year. We just finished a holiday dinner. Many of you were involved with that. And we delivered over 1,000 meals around the county on Christmas Day in the rain during a pandemic, contactless. So that was a huge success. And then we also do Hands in the Kitchen, which is nutrition education workshops, which we've had to go online for all of those. And we do Hands in the Dirt workshops as well. Those are all community partners. And those are also going to go online. So that's what else we do. And then the Support Buddies program with Heineberg.
Mm-hmm. We'll get into all of that more, I think. So Beth, go ahead.
So I'm Beth Hammond, the Executive Director at the Heineberg Community Senior Center. And it was mentioned it was Champlain, but it actually was our center that the efforts kind of a year ago that we, driven by us wanting to consolidate and collaborate more with Champlain in the city. We are a very active center. We were very active inside before COVID. Now we're very active outside, responding to the city, well, the greater Burlington seniors needs. It's been our honor to partner with organizations like Megan's and Hands and many others throughout Burlington.
Great, thank you. And Cameron.
So I'm Cameron Siegel. I'm the Deputy Director of Living Well Group. We're a nonprofit. We operate 3 residential elder care facilities, one of which is Ethan Allen in the New North End. And I am also on Megan's board. And I'm also here as a deeply concerned Burlington resident about issues facing seniors all the time, especially now. So happy to be here.
Well, great. We thought it would be helpful, and we'll probably just go in reverse order and ask you to sort of describe the state of the city for seniors from your perspective. So what you see as the pressing needs, and Sarah has another meeting attendee.
She doesn't like, she doesn't like it when I'm up here talking and feels the need to join in, but usually she'll just
Just can't vote. There's no voting allowed for four-legged voters. We can't make that work.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think the goal here is to get the conversation going, and I like to think of it as not just what are the gaps, if you will, like what are the gaps we aren't filling, but sort of what are the things that are really working and that we need to provide more support to not just take it from working decently well to really working well. So focus on assets as well as needs. So
I just, I know Christine Curtis is on here, and I should have thought of this, but Christine, I want to give you a little job of maybe you working in your department or with Brian Lowe. I'd love to have us get an update on just kind of the overview of the senior population in Burlington, how many folks there are they homeowners, are they renters, what income levels they are. I know actually that VHFA has a lot of that as well, so I'll send you a contact, but that just might be some helpful backdrop for us to get updated on.
Sure.
that would be great. Yeah, great. So what we'll do is ask you to describe your view of sort of both assets and needs of Burlington seniors. I know you don't necessarily all have a Burlington specific focus, but a big part of what you do is Burlington. So it's good to speak generally, but we of course are most concerned about those who call Burlington their home. So Cameron, you're first. Living Well. Tell us about.
I didn't know if we were popcorning that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to touch on the food aspect and the engagement. That's Beth and Megan can definitely cover that. I think that's something those 2 people have done really well, especially getting through COVID. What I did want to talk about is the piece you mentioned about the Aging Commission. I can't remember what it was called in 2019, the recommendation.
We'll just call the commission for now. We'll just call it that, 'cause I don't know.
Council on Aging, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's been supremely successful, and I'll use 2020 because it's a good window. I think it pressed enough people to where we really saw what worked and what didn't work. And having the support of the city on our weekly calls has been supremely helpful to get information out, because we're all doing the same thing, even though we're in different specific fields, right? So senior center to, food organization to long-term care facilities, we're doing the same thing. We have the same problems, and we wouldn't generally talk about issues we're all facing in that way if it weren't for that prompted event that was COVID specific. But one of the things that I was sort of pushing CEDO through Luke McGowan was trying to get some sort of group that was always, a standing coalition, a standing committee, because the senior population is beyond simply just folks living at home. It's, and I've said this a lot, actually, I think Brian's heard me say it a number of times in the Burlington Housing Trust Fund meetings, because it's really supporting the facilities that provide the care and programs that have gone out of their way. There's an LNA program that has been started up after a constant pestering, which proves to be, I'm assuming will prove to be really beneficial. The Housing Trust Fund, so programs like that. The city support directly to facilities, I think, is enormous because none of us, Cathedral Square, Converse Home, Our Lady of Providence and Winooski, none of us are swimming in it. And to care for seniors in Burlington, we need these facilities to exist, because if not, there's the fear that they get bought up by a big company. And we just saw big companies sell off a lot of properties here. So the city's done an awesome job supporting. That would be the one thing I would say that should continue, and that the constant talking with representation from different areas that the Senior Provider Task Force has done, I think is awesome. I don't think it can be understated how helpful that has been. We can ask questions, we can pass information, troubleshoot problems. It doesn't really exist for just seniors really anywhere, and so it's been awesome.
Who convenes that now, and is the focus specific to COVID? Do you think it'll just stop after COVID, so it'll go away? You think? I
think the mayor convened. We all got an email early on from the mayor's office that identified organizations to come together in March. I think it was like the second week in March. But Luke McGowan's been running it. Him, Marcella, and Karen Bastine from the hospital have been running it, and it's entirely COVID focused.
So is it your opinion? I mean, one of the things we're feeling out today is, in fact, do we establish a council on aging or whatever we want to call it? And, how should we do that? That was certainly a recommendation, and it's gotten dropped, and I am aware of the work on the COVID, and I don't think this would necessarily, that's fairly specific, but, as we get into the spring and hopefully everybody gets vaccinated, there are other issues we need to be focusing on.
Absolutely. And, it sort of taking COVID out of the equation, if that group were to meet, I think that it's possible what the improvements made at City Hall Park, where a lot of it was for handicap accessible, it would be issues like that we're all sort of living in, to sort of sit down and all discuss it. I think a standing coalition committee, whatever it's called, with representation from residents living at home, all the organizations that provide the service, and then the facilities in town would be awesome, really.
Thanks, Cameron. And Beth, what about you? What do you see as some opportunities and needs in the community?
Yeah, I love your perspective of going with what is not necessarily what's needed, but what's working, and how can we get it to be there sustainably, which is where we're at. I think we're in the really fortunate position as the community senior center to really feel and know what seniors are needing and lacking, and connecting with them beyond just a resident, to know those that are living outside into the community on their own. I think the partnerships we've made with, Cameron and Megan and many other organizations is just what's great about our community and what's going really well. I think in many ways I could give examples of COVID and before, how those partnerships are important throughout Burlington, in the greater Burlington area. For us, it is funding. It is funding to be sustainable, to keep doing what we're doing, which I think has been great. And I'm honored that we can do it. But that is the reason why we approached the city from 2 years ago. To get that funding, that sustainability, and to grow. And we already partner with Champlain Senior Center informally almost, and there's so much more could be done if there was a group, as Cameron mentioned. I feel exactly the same. This group that was formed because of COVID has been very effective and wonderful. It would be amazing if it could be a long-term group, as we had envisioned the senior council.
Does the hospital provide any financial support to any of your groups? Cash support? No.
Not yet. I mean, we are now the first official telehealth site for the hospital, so they have been, excited about the partnership as we are, and partnering with us, but no funds, no funding.
Do you get funding from the city though?
We do, for sure. I mean, that's a lifeline. Yeah, just right before, as a result of, yes, this conversation, that funding was short term. I mean, for the next 3 years at least, it was increased to a part that it's keeping us going.
Yep.
We are worried that it's not long-term, and, you know, yeah, so the usual nonprofit
Yeah.
concern.
But it's, I
Understood.
believe it's general funds, so it's not held to those sort of federal standards that other funding is, like community development block grant money, all those strings and hoops and all the things you have to do. So it's hopefully fairly straightforward for you to administer, I hope.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
It's,
Okay.
from that perspective, we are incredibly grateful for that.
Yeah.
The ease of the funding, yes.
Great. Yeah.
Somewhat for Cameron's benefit, and I guess the public's benefit, I had a long time career with senior adults, going back to my first job at Birchwood Nursing Home, the Champlain Valley Agency on Aging, Cathedral Square for 16 years. My last career was with Vermont Housing Finance, so I sort of veered out of the senior line. But as a volunteer, in, I don't know, when 2014 till, or I agreed to be the treasurer of the Champlain Senior Center, which essentially was going bankrupt, and was involved with the transfer of that whole program to the city. So I'm very, very conscious of how fragile the senior center is, and now Heidelberg. So just want to make sure everybody knows that, and that is a personal as well as professional interest that we, the city, need to really be very involved with.
I am aware, actually, a big supporter, because you're in the New North End, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so you're right where Ethan Allen is, so in the
Yes.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
Very aware. And
Yeah.
thank you for everything, obviously.
Yeah. All right, Megan, tell us about what you see as opportunities to provide more wraparound support to our older residents.
Okay, a lot of it's what Cameron and Beth have already said for sure. And my understanding was that the senior providers meeting had started prior to COVID. It certainly, I think it was monthly at that point or something, but certainly it became weekly because of COVID, and that has been a huge resource for all of us, whether it's sharing resources or just doing updates about what we're doing in terms of programming, all of that. I mean, it's just helped on every level, and there's been involvement with the state and, you know, senior housing, long-term care facilities, senior centers. It's been a really broad reach of people included with it, and it's been hugely helpful and a lifeline for sure for all of us during this. It's been, I think we don't feel quite so much like we're out there alone as we can often feel. So that's been really helpful. And I like the idea of some kind of a council or a commission for seniors, especially because the population is so large in the city, and we're an old state in general. We're the first or second oldest state, so I think that would be it's appropriate and would be necessary. And I think another huge benefit in the last year has been the number of partnerships that have happened that wouldn't necessarily have happened otherwise if COVID hadn't come along. So some of the smaller partnerships that HANDS has had, those have expanded. So even the support buddies that we started with Heidelberg has lots of other organizations now involved with it. And that the more partnerships there are, the more sustainable it is possible to have these programs. And that's really important, because financials, it's a stress for all of us. All of the nonprofit organizations, of which Cameron is also in Living Well, that's another nonprofit. So it's that's a challenge all the time for sure. And in terms of funding from the city for HANDS, I ask for a small amount of money that comes in annually, typically just for the holiday dinner, but that's it in terms of funding from the city. Otherwise, it's individual donations, and I write a lot of grants. But again, that's not necessarily sustainable. That's annual, and yeah. So I would say those are the other challenges.
Megan, HANDS sprung about how long ago? How long have you been in?
About 20 years ago.
20 years.
Yes.
Time
Yeah.
flies.
And that started when I was working at a senior center, and a senior, we were delivering meals through what's now Agewell on Christmas. And I wanted to go to one of my seniors' homes because I saw her on the list. And I said, oh, I want to go to Martha's. And we got there to deliver. And she said, I can't believe I did this. This is horrible. I'm all by myself. And we couldn't stay because we were delivering more meals. And so I just promised her that the next year we would gather. So we had 20 seniors just get together on Christmas the first year. And then now it's grown to this. So it's pretty amazing. It's a huge community effort, really heartwarming. I mean, this is such a great, Burlington is such a great city to live in. Vermont's a great state to live in. We're very, very lucky.
Do you think seniors feel that way?
Sorry?
Do you think seniors feel supported here? I just want to know what you just said. It's a great place to live. How did seniors feel about that?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think that would be a good thing to survey. And you know, there are a lot of people that are still living in their own homes that are really worried about being able to pay taxes and everything else. And then there's a lot of long-term care that happens within Burlington. And there's a lot of senior housing too. And I don't know how that all breaks down, but each of those I think is a big section of the city and where seniors are living. And I'm always trying to figure out how to get in touch and include the people that aren't necessarily at senior housing or aren't necessarily in a facility, but are living alone, or, I mean, and those are the people I've been most concerned with during COVID as well. The people that are really isolated, even more isolated than living in senior housing right now, which is, and same with long-term care facilities. Everyone's isolated right now because of COVID, but I'm especially worried about the people that are living alone, and we don't know who they are even in some cases.
Right. I know Sarah and Megan remember we used to have, and I don't know how long you've lived with that, but we used to have something called Operation Snow Shovel,
Right.
and that was actually organized by the youth office, and the youth office would find volunteers to take care of sidewalks and walkways and driveways for seniors. And I don't know if anything like that is now. It's probably just informal, maybe. It's just.
Yeah, it's funny that you brought it up, because somebody was asking on Facebook for that exact thing. And Jane Driscoll and I, when we were in leadership Chittenden 1,000 years ago, worked together to put the original one of that together. That was sort of ways to help neighbors and do snow shoveling and everything. And then it got turned into Operation Snow Shovel. And I don't think it happens now.
I don't think it does either.
And I know that there are people, I mean, somebody put a request on yesterday. So there's still a big need, but I don't think it's happening.
Yeah. Well, the partnership idea, I'd like to dig in a little bit more to that and find out if, I personally know the value of this collaborative, bringing people together, getting stakeholders together. But what are some specific examples of what was achieved as a result of that anybody could share with us about what specifically are examples of what comes out of that's you could share?
Do you want me to go, Beth?
You could all go. No.
Okay, yeah, we'll all talk at once. Well, the partnership, for example, the support buddies that we started during COVID. And Beth, I don't have all the partnerships, so Beth would be able to help me fill in around the edges. But the New North End Food Pantry became involved, and now they're sharing some space and freezer space and a location. So we're sharing services with them. The food bank got involved, Vermont Food Bank, and so they're providing some fresh food. Beth was already partnered with Hannaford, so she was getting weekly donations from them. Agewell has helped us out. Who else, Beth?
City Market, everybody eats.
City Market, yes, yeah.
A lot of restaurants, in and out of, everyone eats through it all. From us, as far as the technology part of it, the technology training, Computers for Change, the hospital now, home health and hospice. There's been quite a few. Yeah, that's, as far as support buddies, I think we covered, those were the big ones.
And what does a support buddy do besides be a good pal to someone? What is involved in that?
Yeah, we were trying from the very start, and that is the benefit. You know, there's some weaknesses as far as funding, but the benefit of being two small organizations, within a week's time, we were calling on all our participants when we had to close our doors, you know, so being that kind of buddy, a phone buddy, but also checking in. From the start, we were grocery shopping. Sometimes when we were able, grocery shopping, delivering groceries, meals. In that way, immediately we were wrapping around from the nutrition and food perspective, and emotional help. You know, if our phone buddies, we had about 30 to 40 volunteers when we had to close the first time in March, and there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of mental health issues, and we were giving referrals and references and really things that should happen always, because we have a great community and we have a lot of wonderful community resources, but these phone buddies were talking one-on-one with the seniors and pulling the resources together and communicating it on a very personal, direct level, which was how we'd love it to be always.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it was initially about 600 people that we checked in with. So we just had a lot of volunteers. I was contacting seniors that I knew about, and then Beth within Heidelberg had lots of them. So we connected immediately with a lot of people to find out what they needed. And a lot of people were just saying, I'm okay right now. I mean, everybody was scared. It happened. We should have seen it coming, but we didn't. And so right away, people were really scared and isolated, and weren't hadn't necessarily planned ahead for having enough groceries, and or don't have enough financial help to have groceries in a pantry for, you know, a month's worth or something like that. So that was the first thing, was sort of assessing needs of everybody, and then implementing the meal donations and grocery delivery and pickup and everything. So, and then the next step was, we have now at Heidelberg, there's a person who is working there part-time who is managing the program, which is great, because that means Beth and I can do some of our other programming now. And this woman is just remarkable and has done lots of resource and referral, which is good, because we also are trying to not just put a Band-Aid on it, but if somebody needs food long-term, we're trying to figure out better community resources for some of these folks. And those are the people that always fall through the cracks, and have fallen through the cracks even more during COVID. We have gotten calls with some really, really desperate situations. Literally, I had soup on the stove one night, and we got it delivered to somebody who had no food. So I mean, Burlington is well connected in some ways, but there's still people falling through the gaps for sure.
If I can make on that point too, Burlington can be, and I think has real potential to be a really good model for some of the other towns that are more disconnected for what works. It's a lot easier, I think, for a spread out Bolton or, you know, Huntington to be able to say some of these core things that Burlington has done to reach the socially isolated seniors at home. I think that's, you know, I think it's real potential that Burlington has to sort of say, this is a good thing. Take bits and pieces of it, right? I don't know, I think there's potential in that. I want to say real quick too on the partnership piece pre-COVID. I'm a big believer in really utilizing UVM. Like, we have 11,000 students there every year. And I know that when I was talking to Beth a lot a couple years ago, they had some Champlain students who were teaching classes, and we've had UVM and Champlain and St. Mike's students do internships and jobs, and, you know, they've worked as caregivers and activities in the kitchen. And, you know, one of the things that the senior population could really benefit from is getting the youth to care at scale, and really connecting our educational institutions to our senior community. I think has immense benefit, because it checks off so many things. Even if they don't get involved at all working or volunteering long term, at least there's a potential that they care a little bit more when they're a 30-year-old voter in Burlington. You know what I mean? And that's the real potential that hasn't been harnessed at scale in town, because it's been us kind of just trying to set up relationships. But I think there's real potential there. I mean, we have 3 colleges within shouting distance.
Yeah, it's
And
almost as though we would do a reverse mentoring program. And I know that I saw Jen Berger's post about that. Is that your program? Is that the Buddies program? Megan, do you know if Jen Berger?
yeah, I do know what yeah, it's not part of our support buddies. She is a support buddy, but because
maybe it's random.
it might have been from that. I don't know, but she ended up being a support buddy doing phone check-ins with a number of different seniors. And then in August at one of the support buddies recognition event, she met the person that she had really become friends with over the phone. And it's happened with other support buddy partnerships too. And it's been so heartwarming. So these two are, weaving through the crowd, trying to find each other because they didn't even know what the other ones looked like. But that has been a really wonderful silver lining of all of this during COVID, because there really have been some friendships that have grown.
We helped the Lawrence College of Medicine students who were essentially left in March and April with nothing to do. And I was in conversation with them early on, and something similar to a phone calling. They were like teaching yoga classes virtually. But I think Sarah can probably appreciate how important it is for our young doctors to care about our seniors. I think there's you can count on one hand the number of geriatric physicians and psychiatrists in town, and it's a major problem for a lot of seniors living here. So I see so much benefit in that collaboration piece.
Yeah, and we had some of with support buddies, we had some of the nursing students get involved, and that was really great.
Right.
I was just going to say, Cameron, about one of the Hands in the Dirt programs that we do at Living Well at Ethan Allen Residence. Those have been summer interns from colleges. And obviously we couldn't do it this summer, which was awful because it's a really amazing program. And there are statistics about dementia and how that memory can be improved and symptoms of dementia can be improved by 30% if people just literally get their hands in the dirt. It's retrieved memory, it's the microbes that are in the dirt. I mean, it is just a really, really helpful program to do, and it was really tough to not be there. But those are all young interns that come through Vermont Community Garden Network, and they're just remarkable, and they've been a wonderful asset as well to the program, and connecting younger folks with seniors. Mm-hmm. And at a place like Ethan Allen Residence, we've realized that there are potentially 4 generations that are there between staff and their kids. And then, you can have 2 different generations because people live so much longer now. So even residents there could be 2 generations. So we've got 4 generations, and why would we not be getting them all together when we can?
Right.
Absolutely. And I do want to mention also the support buddies volunteers. They were medical students. They were graduate medical students who came in, everyone from, nursing students that might come in now for telehealth. But we did have some, very much to Megan and Cameron's point. It was great to see them so excited to make the phone calls and to give the personal care. I received many calls. This person isn't answering. Should we do a wellness check on them? They were that concerned on that level. And I did have to do some wellness checks, and it was a good thing on some of them. But these medical students cared, and it was wonderful to see. Those were from UVM. They were from UVM, but we've also had Champlain mental health students come and run mental health programs. And the multi-generational programs are huge and wonderful. We even have 2nd graders being pen pals right now. We're starting that up for a 3rd year. So across the board, the multi-generational is important. And as far as being a model for wrapping around our seniors, like Cameron mentioned, I think that's important too, because if we just throw out there's help, call this number if you need help. Many seniors won't, because they, save that for someone else. I'm not that bad. I don't need it. But if you talk about a college student or, some kind of connection, a personal connection, that makes a difference, and that matters, because there's so much pride, and there's other factors when you're talking about this older generation that could really get in the way of help being delivered.
You have a lot of experience in this area, and I wondered if you have specific questions for this group that you think would help us in thinking through the strategy, the structure, the every aspect of convening an aging council and or a senior council or whatever you want to call it. What do you think?
Well, I like the idea of doing an assessment of what seniors think they need, as opposed to us thinking we know what seniors need. I mean, I guess I am a senior now, but but it's just in the same way that you couldn't take all sixth graders and say, oh, they all want the same thing. Or, in the example of Ethan Allen residents, if you have two different generations, those generations don't even necessarily want or need the same thing. So I think that, and again, people's living situations affect what they might wish to have or think is important as well. If they're in a community living situation, they may feel a little more secure in terms of their housing and food, but in other cases that might not be necessarily true. So I think some kind of an assessment would be a good way to start.
I don't know that I have a specific question, but I would want to say, make sure that you're paying attention to the staff that work in facilities like this, because, we have a large number of new American caregivers at Ethan Allen residence. For organizations like AALV to have some representation, or some of the labor organizations in town, I think is important, because it's to Megan's point about the big community of generations. Staff are probably the last you would think about being involved, but our facilities are nothing if we don't have staff to run them, and that's where we are nationally, and that's where we are in Burlington. We have all these folks on unemployment, all these businesses closing, and we've never needed staff more than ever. And there's some disconnect, and there's something that I think the collaboration can help address, right? If it's AALV, they're just on my mind, or on a committee with representation from Ethan Allen residents, they hear that there's staffing needs, and they have some new Americans who might need a job. Maybe they were a caregiver back where they came from. It's like, I would say, make sure that the staffing piece and the representation, that's all sort of connected to that, be a part of it, because they're just as involved, honestly.
Well, and the other part of that, Cameron, is employment in general. And if the city is going to do the LNA program again, that's such a great way for people to get a license in 10 weeks, I think it was, and that would be really helpful. And there are reasons that people are concerned about working in long-term care right now, but it also is potentially potentially a great job too.
It's a good job. The pay is good compared to working in a lot of other industries. And I think it's an education piece. Like, for a majority of facilities, the pay is competitive. It's not, I think there's this perception that you're paid the minimum wage. We don't have anybody making minimum wage. And I know a lot of our partners are in that same boat. So there's a bit of education, I think, for the general population.
You just said the city sponsored that. What were you referring to, Megan? I didn't even know that. So
I think as part of Resource and Recovery, they were doing, they did an LNA program, and I think that it's gearing up. I don't know if it ever ended, but I think it's gearing up again. That's my understanding. Through senior providers meeting, that's where I had heard about it.
It is. It's Ethan Allen residents at Cathedral Square are going to be the first to sort of pass through organizations. So LNAs need clinical hours to get their licensing. And so they're going to work at Ethan Allen residents. And they're going to work at, I'm not sure how many of Cathedral Square's locations, but that's city sponsored. And that's massive. So that produces jobs there. One thing I would say is—
Who does that though? Is that done through CEDO?
It's through CEDO. Gillian Nanton or Gillian? I can't
remember. It's our program we received. It's with the state funding we received. It's a program. It hasn't started yet, but it's going to be starting very soon. And Gillian Nanton with CEDO is that program manager.
Okay.
And so, Christine, that's at no charge to the student. Is that correct?
That is correct. As far as I'm aware, the program is designed. It's been altered a little bit to meet, the regulations put forward by the state. But yes, that is my understanding as it exists right now.
And that point is actually huge, Megan. I'm glad you asked that too, because that's a major barrier that a lot of the lower income workers in Burlington faces. We've had a conversation with some of our staff. You'd be a great LNA, which could potentially move you towards an LPN. You know, it's a great career move, but they're paycheck to paycheck, you know, truly paycheck to paycheck. So it's harder for them, especially with the family, to fork out the funds to cover that. So it being free is massive. One thing I would on the assessment piece, be really interesting to see what percent of workers, Burlington workforce, are in and involving organizations with seniors, because I think it's probably a lot higher than many people would assume, because we have so many homes, you know,
Right.
we have so many organizations.
Yeah. Sarah, you have questions? I'm waiting. I'm hoping you're gonna.
Well, I'm in Solange, and I do like the idea of assessment. Who from the CEDO office is running the current council, or
Luke.
Oh,
Luke himself?
Yeah, he if he's not there, it's Marcella.
Okay. I'm just sort of spinning in my head, kind of, you know, the next steps and, you know, what's the best process. I mean, maybe it's a subgroup of the group that's been meeting to sort of strategize on, you know, how do we, I hate to say it, formalize it, but formalize this. And, you know, it's you still have the current COVID needs, but it sounds like we really need to formalize it, kind of get a structure, you know, who invite the players, and we probably already have a list of the players, and kind of look at how they might start dealing with certain of the needs. And I don't know, again, how you attempt an assessment. That's a conversation that I'd be interested in having. You know, how do we sort of approach that? Who could do it? How could it get done?
I mean, that's a great way to use this incredible network, really, is you're all connecting with the seniors. So if we develop a really simple instrument, a tool to ask them, you know, rather than asking people some of whom may not relate to, you know, digital ways of communicating, but direct questions and answers to do this might be really, I think, I know certainly in my family, there's not a lot of internet interaction, at least with my parents. I know that. So.
There's a bit of precedent also for surveying seniors. Gail Moreau, who's the chair of the board at the Heidelberg Center, and then she worked with Dale, the Department of Aging, Independent Living, to survey senior centers on their needs. Then I did a follow-up survey a couple years later. And so we actually had a ton of response from the centers. So the centers are a good resource to get information to them, and then they can sort of push that out and get some information and get it back to you. So I just wanted to put that out there. The centers are a really good resource in town to sort of just reach these folks. And we had thousands of responses statewide, which was shocking.
How many do you think you got in Burlington? Do you think you got a few hundred in Burlington?
Yeah, right.
At least.
I mean, Beth, how many do you reach?
Oh, it's funny. I was just going to say, tomorrow during our food distribution, I am sending out. I just finished a survey. How are you? How are you doing? What else do you need? Because we feel like we aren't. I'm assuming that there's a need for tech support and more computers out there, but we haven't heard from anyone requesting it. So how many do I have? I send out an email to over 500, and it's got about a 40% open rate. When I send mails out, it's over hard copy. When I mail, it's over 600, and that's not everyone. So for this survey, I was going to connect with the SASH coordinators, the visiting nurses, you know, just in every way, try to blanket as many seniors as we can with this very brief survey. That's going out tomorrow, actually.
Because Beth and I also, our estimate is that 40% of the seniors we serve don't have internet access or have computers or anything else. So part of what Beth is really gearing up is doing the tech support, partly for support buddies, so seniors could learn how to order groceries online, which they wouldn't necessarily have those skills. And then with the vaccination registration that has to happen, you know, there are going to be more and more ways that we're trying to get seniors involved. But that's also something to certainly, if we're assessing people and doing surveys and everything, to make sure that we're getting people through direct mail as well, and that we're not just getting people who have computer skills. It's a big, you know, the varied skill set on that is huge.
And that's why the partnerships with the sashes and the LNA in the doctor's office. I would love to have time to visit the doctor's office and say, could you let's find out why aren't some seniors going to the doctors, and why aren't they taking advantage of telehealth? You know, unfortunately we have a volunteer who passed away in April because she didn't want to go into the hospital. So I don't think the need's not there, but we're not hearing from anybody for tech support or telehealth requests. And we need to know why.
Well, you shared it today on your Facebook about the governor asking for support, helping seniors use tech to access the vaccines, which is an enormous need. And I think a lot of it's being distributed online, which sort of is illogical given all the things that we know.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we have the senior center that operates at the Old North End Community Center, and I don't know honestly, you know, what are their hours, what are their programs they offer. You all probably have a much better idea. I have not been keeping close track, so.
Well, that's the formerly Champlain Center run by Parks and Rec.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think they're closed right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're closed for in-house programming,
Right.
but they're doing a great job getting connecting over the phone, because they're much different demographics than our senior centers. So a lot of phone check-ins and activities and meals. That's their big thing, is getting meals and groceries out.
Yeah. What is the difference you just mentioned between the two populations? How would you characterize that?
How would it?
The difference between your population and theirs. You just said they're very different.
Right, more lower income, less diverse. You know, we've got the great diverse. We've got diversity as far as low income to those that are quite comfortable but just have no one income. But downtown, it's a lot of the new Americans. That's a big, and then the lower income folks that have needs in slightly different ways than our center. But
Yeah, and I would say that's also why they are both really important, because even I think there might be some idea that we should just pull resources and become one senior center, but I think it really is different populations, it's different needs. Again, the population in Burlington, I think, completely warrants at least 2 senior centers. So
That's not even touching the South End either.
right, exactly.
Exactly.
Because I remember, Beth, when we were on this committee talking about it, the South End was unrepresented, which.
Ask if you think the South End seniors either just go it alone, or what do they? I mean, do you think they go to your center somewhat, Beth, and somewhat to the Old North End Community Center, Senior Center?
Somewhat. Well, we get people, sure, from all around Burlington, Colchester, Essex. So definitely, I think though there's an unmet need, because the beauty of a senior center is, you know, a real local community feel, that mini walk, you know, because transportation is a huge issue for seniors in Burlington. So some do, but I wouldn't say sufficiently. We do not sufficiently meet that need in the South End.
And I was going to say that transportation in general is a huge issue for seniors around the city. It's become even more difficult during COVID because there's seniors that are uncomfortable to get on the buses. SSTA has a few more parameters about it. So that's been really, really difficult. Transportation is a huge issue that I think should certainly be part of the assessment for seniors. I'm sure that there are seniors in the South End that go out and do grocery shopping, but that's about it. They're not probably not heading to a senior center even. So yeah, I think that's a part of the city that's not.
Does the city provide any transportation right now to seniors to get to either senior center? No, not at all.
It's very much needed. Even to just connect the 2 centers so we can share programming and then loop around to South End. There's so many possibilities, but
Right.
Transportation is a huge issue.
Yeah, they do. The Champlain Senior Center sometimes uses the Parks and Rec van, but that's based on availability. It would be great to have a senior van that could be used by the city and used by the senior centers for field trips and as Beth said, just connecting them and getting people there, but it doesn't happen now.
The Champlain Center way back had a contract with SSTA to bring people to the center. Does that not exist anymore?
I assume that it still does, but I know during COVID that's been a little bit more difficult. And I don't know if the contract still is with SSTA. I assume that it is with Champlain. I don't know.
Yeah, we help our participants with SSTA, but many of them choose not because they need to have this window of time when they're picked up, and they need to give the time where they ready to go home, and it just it's not the ease of use for coming to a senior center for social reasons. It's just a little bit tricky.
It doesn't function as well as a bus route that you can show up and sort of hop on.
Right.
Right.
Or even a taxi. It's not the same kind of thing because as Beth said, there's a window, so they'll show up between 2 and 3 or whatever. It's based on what other appointments they're working on.
Again, it may have changed since 2016, but I thought the center itself at that time organized it. And again, it was a huge expense and it was a problem because the center couldn't really afford that service, but it was, scheduled pickups. And I'm sure those are all the kind of things I think we need to sort out. I was going to mention, and also we can have a conversation offline or maybe an email thing around, again, getting some of the data with the center, Champlain at the time, and this was going back a few years, somebody, and I think it was at UVM, has the data of the information by neighborhoods. How many old people in certain, I don't know how they do it, probably census blocks, but that's, I think, a level of data that we might want to kind of understand and look at. And in fact, that part of my recollection is there weren't as many older people in the South End as you might think, because that was at the time, a group that the Champlain Center was trying to figure out how to reach. And so I think that's all the kind of data that we ought to figure out. I mean, who's living where, what is the demographic? I mean, on one hand, we're not that big a city, but on the other hand, we do have pretty distinct neighborhoods. And I think we have a lot of division, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but a lot of young people and a lot of old people, I think as a city, it'll be curious to look at that demographic. Because in fact, we are, if you look at the median age, we're really a very young city.
Right.
The average age in Chittenden County is 43, and in Burlington, it's 27. I mean, that's hugely different. So even though we talked about the number of old people, if you look at our medians, we come out really young.
That's 12,000 undergrads at Champlain and UVM, though.
That's what I was going to say, yeah. Might skew it a bit.
Yeah.
Census, so they're not all there. But I think parsing that out and understanding it is really what we need to spend a little time on, because we don't understand, or I don't understand, kind of how that breaks out. Where do those folks live?
And they need to be. I know Kelly at AARP did something like that. It's been a few years though, so it probably, everything changes so quickly. But
yeah, because it seems to me as though it's shifted. When I moved even into this house 25 years ago, there were a lot more seniors living around me, and those folks they're not alive anymore. They were older at that point. And I think in the South End now there's more senior housing. If you think of by the shopping plaza by Hannaford, there's just more senior housing. So there may be, the demographics may shift through the city too, but I think that would be a great thing to find out by neighborhood, would be really helpful.
And we're losing homeowners. We're through a variety of things. Houses are turning into apartments. So that's a phenomenon. And so that's all, I think, the kind of thing we need to get a better understanding of. And then, how that fits in each of the neighborhoods.
If I can make one, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I think it's helpful for people to really conceptualize reaching our seniors in a different way. It's more than just sort of like the high level. It's sad that they're home. There's real health implications to being socially isolated. There's data that it's social isolation can be as dangerous as, I think it was like 10 to 15 cigarettes a day. And then if you think that 75% of seniors in the United States are living with a chronic health condition, 50% of them have 2 or more. And then you just think if they're isolated, you're just exacerbating that, which beyond simply being bad is a strain on your hospitals, is a strain on your area agencies on aging, and is a strain on all the organizations. So there's so much benefit to spending the time and the energy to reach them beyond just it's the right thing to do. There's like real health implications to it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Completely. Yes.
Yeah. I had the advantage growing up of living next door to my grandmother and my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother lived to be 104, so I had this unique opportunity as a kid. And then as an adult, I had a grandmother until I was 52 years old, and she lived to be 105. So the notion of aging was very different. But now my mother is in her mid-80s and she has Alzheimer's. And so I'm seeing like how vulnerable seniors can be, where I had these other 2 matriarchs who didn't look vulnerable ever until they were literally on their deathbeds, you know. So it's a pretty amazing experience. And so I want to just,
You're going to be on city council for a while then.
I don't
more
think I'll
years?
be doing this for that long. I hope not. No.
That may speed up the aging process.
I was just gonna say that would take quite a few years off of that. The actuarial would say, no, if you want to get to that, you better move on. Yeah.
Well, and maybe this is a task, and again, we could start with, you know, how do we gather the data, who could do it, and then what would be a good assessment tool. I mean, and I don't want to recreate the wheel, so if stuff's been done, we should sort of figure that out as well.
Well, it sounds like some data might be out there already, though. Cameron just
I
mentioned.
think there's a ton of stuff. I mean, I'm just not a data guru, but I think, you know, census, for all its faults, does have a lot of data. I know the housing study, that the statewide housing needs assessment, and I don't know, Rome does its own, whether they looked at that. I know VHFA did it for the statewide plan. So, I mean, maybe, Brian, we ought to put on a task list.
AARP did something pretty involved a few years, not that long ago.
Yeah, like who's got what, and I mean, get the right
Yeah.
players in the room and talk about, you know, what do we have, and then what are we missing, and see if we could get someone to parse that together.
Yeah. If we were to do a meeting, a focused discussion about how, you know, the needs and the purposes, the role of a council or commission, who are the key players that should be part of that discussion in terms of providers, not, you know, hold out for a minute, the idea of asking seniors directly, which I believe is really important, but, you know, so who's missing from this discussion?
I mean, we've invited a few that we invited: Home Share Vermont, Age Well, Cathedral Square, AARP, and we did this on pretty short notice, and so that's who I think we invited.
Of course,
The food bank is definitely part of it. They're huge.
You mean feeding Chittenden?
Feeding Chittenden.
Oh, okay,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Because I also, it might be 2 steps too. There might be an assessment, just doing a survey with some of the providers too, and saying, if we were going to assess, you know, do an assessment of senior needs in Burlington, what categories would you like to include? Because I think we've probably even forgotten some. We've touched on some of them, but
Home health, we didn't talk about home health.
right, there may be some big glaring thing that we're missing before the same kind of or similar survey goes to the seniors. So it could even be a quick, really quick, what are some areas that you think, if we were going to do a survey of senior needs in Burlington, what are some areas that we should be covering? Or what are the 3 top areas or something like that? Because that would be interesting to see what providers think.
Well, it sounds like at least the group you've got going now, does that cover most of the providers that you're talking about, or?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, like Home Share is a perfect example, foster grandparent program, RSVP. You know, there are a number of organizations that aren't there every week. Maybe they know about it, maybe they don't. Other senior centers, yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to capacity too, that if you're running a place all by yourself, it's really hard to say, okay, here's another meeting that I need to go to, especially right now. That might be one of the issues, but I think there are a lot of people that aren't represented there that are providers in Burlington proper.
And Jesse Bridges, even from United Way, he was part of our group. I know he cares deeply, and he was at many meetings. So speaking of RSV, but starting with Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's obvious people like Jane Odell would be awesome on it. She's obviously
yeah,
so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Does RSVP, that's a United Way program, right?
Yes. Yes.
Is foster grandparents also? It is.
It is now, yep. But even having Dale, the disabilities and aging, independent living, that would be good. Angela's right in the New North End. She works for them.
Angela would actually be great because she oversees the adult services division, which is the meal
Right.
sites, senior centers. So her input is really broad.
Yep.
And I think someone like Karen back came from the hospital would be critical, I think, right?
Yeah.
Because I think they could be playing perhaps, shall we say, a more of a role.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could talk about that for a long time, but yes.
Boy, nothing changes. I think I had that conversation 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
We got to push.
Karen's actually a huge advocate. She's been amazing with helping me set up the telehealth, helping us. And I mentioned the need for foot clinics, for foot care, and she jumped all over that. Speaking
I've heard
about
that one before too.
What was that?
I said I've heard that one before too.
Oh,
It's sort of deja vu all over again here.
Yeah. And
Yeah, it hasn't changed that much, I don't think, in 20 years. It's gotten better, but-
VNA would be good to include though too, because they work with lots of seniors and
Yeah.
keep seniors in their homes.
Who's the
Yeah.
key person who works at senior services at VNA? Who's that? Did we have a name?
that's
We missed
now
that
home
one.
health and hospice.
I didn't hear you.
Who's the key person?
Person at VNA, a name.
One.
I don't know.
It's easy enough to find
Heather
out. right?
Filano, I think. She's on our call.
Yeah, and I can't remember the name of the person I worked with for the holiday dinner, but
Easy enough to find out, though.
is that where Heather Menard works? Is she at VNA? That might be a name. Anyhow, yeah, we could.
All right, well, we have obviously our own in-house work to do because Luke is already convening this and Jillian is already doing the LNA program. So there's kind of and then we have the work happening at Parks and Rec. So we have, and that's maybe okay. We don't have any city staff that's focused on these issues. We just have it as, here's other duties as assigned. Oh, senior issues, by the way, and that I think is problem. That's to me, it is sort of a problem is that we don't have any real focus. We have a number of efforts happening, perhaps, moving in parallel or moving it this way or who knows which way. But
Well, Brian, maybe one thing this committee could, sort of multiple things. I mean, I think putting together a list, a comprehensive list of the providers in the city is a place to start, and maybe working off of the current list that CEDO has and then circulating it and kind of adding would be a place to start. But maybe we should have a meeting at least with Luke and Cindy White and, from the city level saying, okay, we want to maybe form this committee, and kind of really figure out administratively how we start to approach that. I mean, one obvious significant problem is we're kind of still in the middle of COVID. So, you know, capacity becomes a little bit of an issue, probably a lot of an issue. But that's, I think, a frank discussion we should have. You know, what can we bite off now and what could we bite off later? And then
the groundwork will be laid and will need to be laid so that when we are on the other side of COVID, we have
right.
more to offer, more to connect seniors. You know, we used to have a librarian who literally was an outreach librarian that would go to senior places and bring books and bring music, and it was that we had a very different approach as a city.
If I can make one point, there's the timing of this is interesting. Dale is rewriting or updating the state plan on aging. I think it's every 3 or 4 years.
Mhm.
And it's 2022, I think. I think it's effective 2023. I think this is good timing where I was talking about the model of Burlington. You know, they write that plan and it lays out for the next 3 or 4 years where the focus is going to be. So this could be a really interesting timing thing to sort of feed information to the state for the other cities that could benefit from it. So I don't know that a lot of people know about the state plan and aging, so I wanted to put that out there.
I used to, in the 70s, this is how old I am, did them for the Champlain Valley Agency on Aging.
Awesome.
So I actually had to write a plan or several plans during that period of time, but a long time ago.
They've probably gotten way longer. They're really long now.
I don't even know. I'm trying to think, again, showing my age, but you know, we used to handwrite it and give it to a secretary to type up. I mean, we didn't have personal computers. Madge, the Champlain Valley Agency on Aging secretary, took shorthand. That was like 75, 6, 7, 8.
Seniors that you could still go to who could do shorthand.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right.
Yeah, and I would just, I mean, Sarah's really aware of this, but there are so many different companies that own senior housing in Burlington as well. So it's more than just a few players.
Yeah.
That should, I mean, just even like the O'Brien brothers, or, you know, there are lots of smaller ones too that should be included in the.
What did you mention earlier? I think Cameron said, and a company has sold off a bunch of senior properties. What were you referring to?
Genesis.
And what did, and so
Burlington
they
Health and Rehab.
Yeah.
They sold their facilities.
It's more statewide, and I mean, obviously it affected the one they own in Burlington, but they did it statewide.
Right, and the reason I brought it up is because it's a fear. It's a fear that I hear in the industry as we're talking, just in as sort of the doomsday scenario of not supporting these neighborhood residences. It's our marketing plan is we are a neighborhood home for you. You can live, you know, Sarah can live in the New North End and literally move across the street essentially to Ethan on Residence and stay there, and you can be homey. And a lot of these care homes are like that. And the fear is if finances get so tough and they have to sell, or like Megan said, it's like one family running it and they get old themselves, they have to sell, there's not good succession planning. The fear is that private companies buy up these properties and the care is it's just not the same. And so that's really sort of what I wanted to touch on.
Cameron, I think Elderwood is that as well.
Yes.
That also got purchased by a much larger company as well.
It is, yeah. And pretty much all you have to do, and this is not to disparage those, but spend any time looking on Indeed at the jobs that are available. It's all high-level administrative supervisors. So, and they can give a director of nursing $50,000 sign-on bonus, and none of us can do that, but they're always hiring that position. And it's not a coincidence.
Yeah, right.
Well, the skilled nursing facilities, it's just a different industry, for better or worse. And so that, I mean, those are, I think, some topics that a council on aging could also deal with, and that wouldn't mean that you would exclude having those people at the table, but I think there's that. And my guess is we still continue to lack affordable assisted living in the city. There's just not enough of it, and it's not reimbursed adequately, which is kind of a whole other, I think, topic area that we need to focus on.
Well, I think there's also, I don't want to drone on too long, but there's also this education piece around affordable housing. So if there's a private pay room in town at a long-term care facility, it could still be $7,000, $6,000 a month. And it's like, if you have $200,000 worth of savings, which you would be in the minority of folks aging, you can spend that really quick. So then you're immediately, essentially on Medicaid, and you are now no longer, or you're now low income. And so that's I think the education piece that we need to really think about is you can have all this money saved and it's going to go really fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Brian, you talked about there's all these pieces moving on the city level. Marcella sent out 2 points. I can forward it to you if you want. That the council, the coalition of mayors, the exact word, it's the
U.S. Conference of Mayors.
Yeah. So there are two points that they're going to advocate to the state on, and one of them is a study group. The second is incentivize local innovation for matching funds for LNA programs. But the first piece is a study group.
Focused on seniors issues.
Long-term care facilities, and part of that are they list here focusing on families and residents. So it's the seniors living in the community.
So
I don't know if you knew that was happening.
The Council on Mayors is doing this?
Yeah, it must be the Vermont League of Cities and Towns.
I can tell you. So
I thought it was just the state mayor's group.
this is what he said. This is from Luke McGowan. This is an extract of a larger set of policies that the city will share to discuss with the legislative delegation next week, 2 weeks ago. We also plan to share with the Vermont Mayors Coalition.
Well, again, Brian, maybe our next meeting should be with the city officials, where this might kind of come under. I mean, I'm thinking particularly Luke and Cindy would be the.
And yeah, I would say,
obvious.
and Marcella also. She's
Yeah, I
been-
mean, I'm at the CEDO office and
Yeah.
Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
So, because it sounds like we're kind of a little over the map, and I think the goal of certainly this conversation and then in the future is how do we get everything more coordinated in one spot. And I don't want to make any presumptions, but I think an ask that's bubbling up from me, or at least as a counselor, is who in the city could help coordinate this effort. And again, it's happened, it was forced on the city, I'll say, by COVID. So let's take the good out of that and see how we can kind of continue it. I mean, hopefully by this fall, we're not dealing with the intensity of COVID, where hopefully all our folks, including myself, have been vaccinated, and we're on a different level of conversation. So I think I'm saying let's continue the effort and really focus on the next phase, which is post-COVID. You know, by the summer, can we get a sort of a permanent group and a permanent home, possibly, for this potential council? You know, who could do that? How could we do that? And I'd like to ask that fairly directly of some of the city staff. And
Yeah, I think we can follow up, and I will follow up directly with Luke and let him know about this discussion, and that we want our next meeting to be focused on, you know, how to develop a strategic and sort of coherent city approach to senior issues. Right? It's been a scattershot for a long time, because we don't have like an automatic, oh, that's the human services department of the city. We don't have that as a city. We don't even have a health department. We don't have a lot of infrastructure that other cities have, but it doesn't mean we can't find a way to meet the need with what we have available.
So CEDO's been that bucket, and CEDO's
Exactly. CEDO's the catch-all. When you don't know where it goes to CEDO usually. Yeah.
And make it a fun name for the council too.
I was going to say, Megan, you should come up with the acronym, and then we'll figure out the words
And then
that go
figure
into
out the
it.
words. Okay, I'll work on that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in some cities, and I'm just tossing this out there, the the senior center and the city sponsorship of it has also been where they've housed some of that. And of course, they've supported the staff to do it. So, I mean, I think if you look, at least Vermont, but definitely outside of Vermont, you know, that's been a municipal answer. It hasn't necessarily resided in city government, but it's resided with a partner that the city supported to be the council on aging for that municipality. So there's there's a different approach. It doesn't have to be a city employee. It's just simply where do you get the capacity and how do you run it? And then that's the place where we, the council, the mayor, should be looking for input on various policies.
So what about the standing committees? Because we have successful city committees. Is this not something that could act exactly like one of those transportation committees?
Well, I think they could, except a lot of those are really focused on internal operations of the city. You know, like using transportation as an example. I mean, they look literally at where we need sidewalks, where we need bike lanes, you know, traffic flow. So this committee is probably the broadest committee there are. We have a very big berth of community development and neighborhood revitalization. I would look, and you know, this would be a conversation we could and should have with the council, but I think the goal is to set up, and I'm just going to call it Council on Aging for now, which is not a very fun name, but we can be more fun, and then kind of talk about where could you house it. I'll be very blunt to tell you, and maybe Brian, is you actually don't want it to be a city committee because we get very constrained sometimes in how we can operate. And I think a good council on aging wants to be a strong advocate for things. And that's a little different position than being an administrator and an implementer of stuff. So, you know, now it could be attached to this committee, the Community Development Committee, as sort of a sub, group. And because we have a lot of different things, you know, under our wing. I mean, we look at housing code enforcement, and then we look at development issues. So there's no reason a council on aging couldn't be under our wing, but I think you want it. I personally think what that's open for discussion is, you know, you want some, want it to be broad. On the same hand, you want support, you want administrative support. So I think that's something we've got to tackle a little bit.
And you want it to be sustainable too. So you don't want it to be under a temporary committee or something like that, but you want it to be really part of the city itself, so that it's.
And I'm not, we have so many councils, but I think there are a lot, you know, I don't even know, maybe Brian has a good example of councils or committees attached to city council committees. I mean, there probably are. I mean,
it's hard to think of any right now, Sarah. That's a good question. I was trying to think about, have we done this with other sort of issues? And I think you're right that for the most part, the boards and commissions that we have are directly related to the functions of a municipal department for the most part. And it goes back to that issue which I raised, which is we don't have a human services department, and local government in Vermont, that's a heavy lift. That's a big thing to think about.
Yeah, I mean, the resources aren't going to be there, and I'm not sure I would be advocating. I think, you know, we have some strong nonprofit partners in the community, and there's no reason for city government to duplicate what they do. I think we're trying to, I see part of it as how can we all get on the same page? And I think the COVID is a great example of we did it. And so let's just not let that drop. Let's move on past COVID to all the other stuff and kind of in my mind, formalize it in some fashion.
And we've been responding to COVID, so it's like it hasn't been a
Yeah.
work group really. That's the thing, huge potential too. Is we're just like, okay, what's the what fresh hell is this week?
Right. That's what I was thinking too. It was more of a support group. How do we get
Yeah.
through? How do we answer questions, opposed to how do we implement change and connect together?
And recommendations and all that. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and I think that COVID and this group has brought out some of the gaps which have been there but are even larger now. And I think those gaps are going to be larger after COVID too. I mean, I think that there are just so many people just really living on the edge. Seniors, that's what I'm talking about. But to have some more support services from the city all in one place, I think makes a lot of sense. And I agree, Sarah, I don't think that means duplication, but it's just looking at how do we help out with transportation or housing or home health or, social isolation, whatever those issues are.
We've covered quite a bit, and we have 5 minutes before our agenda is, at least my idea of this committee is that it goes an hour and a half. After that, I think we start to be a little bit less focused and effective, especially at dinner time. So I think it's a good time to wrap up for tonight and commit that this will be our focus for a while. I think this committee, we have our work cut out for us to lay the groundwork for next steps, and having you all as thinking partners is really critical to us. We're going to be, we greatly appreciate your continued engagement with us on this, and names of people. I like the idea of, reaching out to some other key stakeholders who could help us with this.
Yeah, I think Luke's a really good start. And even if you did a Google Docs or something and people could enter organizations as, I just was sitting here writing down a whole bunch of them that should be included in some way. So, and before we wrap up, I just wanted to say happy Inauguration Day.
Oh,
Did you make that today, Megan?
No, I did not. I ordered it, but I had the opportunity to wear it. I was home today, but somebody came to the door, so I was able to put it on. And
oh, cool.
cheers to a new era, for sure.
Terry,
So,
appreciate it. Right?
what?
You could wear that for Terry. He would appreciate it.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Oh, I have worn it for him for sure. And I got another one, and one of our hands volunteers, I knew that he would be a good one. So I said, I showed it, I went to the door and had it on, and he said, oh, that's really cool. And I said, do you want one? Because I have one extra, thinking that he would be the one. And he said, I do. So he has the other one, but I think all of our hearts feel a little bit lighter today.
They sure do.
So that's a good
It's
thing.
amazing what kindness and compassion can do.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say it. The world feels a little kinder today. So I watched it all day long. It was on in the background of all my work.
I did.
Loved it.
Yeah.
I was obsessed.
Yeah.
So, and I learned some things. Just the process and everything was really interesting. I didn't know about the rotunda and going kind of from station to station and accepting gifts and everything. I didn't, there were pieces of.
I don't think many of us do that at all.
Well, I was saying it was sort of sad that you didn't have the big crowd, because I like big crowd, but it made it easier because you could focus in on all the pieces, and other times you were just focused on this giant crowd, and that wasn't distracting
right
today. So I liked that, actually.
Yeah.
Someone did catch a picture and put it on social media of Bernie sitting in his chair with his mittens on, and he kind of looked like he looked sort of forlorn. Actually, he didn't look thrilled by it, but whatever. I'm sure he's
probably freezing cold, and they had everybody sitting apart.
Yeah, and he probably wants to get to work. He never really liked those ceremonies. Okay, let's do the real work.
Not his cup of tea, I don't know, but
Yeah, mittens made by a local Vermont woman. So
That's right.
Perfect Bernie thing.
That's right.
All right. Well, we will be in touch with you all to take this to the next step. But
Great.
Christine,
and thank you both of you, and for the rest of the committee for working on this too. I think I can speak for Beth and Cameron and me to just say that thank you very much. This is important. And sometimes we feel like we're in a vacuum.
Well,
yelling.
after we talk, we can maybe get Brian kind of a little bit of a schedule going and figure out what we need. And
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've said it 1,000 times. It's hard to imagine. It's almost impossible to imagine this conversation with city council in pretty much any other major city, you know, across the country. It's Burlington at its finest. So super, super appreciative, and reach out for whatever, really, because this is no reason not to spend time trying to help along the way.
Yeah, thank you. We'll be in touch. Thanks a lot.
okay,
Everyone,
thanks.
good night.
Thank you
Bye.
so
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Nice to see you all.